Good morning, everybody. In this video I want to talk to you about some interesting statistics that I've been looking at lately that have to do with character pick rates in Tekken 7. A couple of days ago one of my viewers sent me this image in the comment section on one of my videos. And at that time I looked at it, I didn't think all that much about it, but I saved it onto my desktop and I've come back to it a couple of times since then because I think there are some interesting things that we can extrapolate by looking at this information. So this is aggregated from the PS4 leaderboards, and it's a snapshot taken at Vanguard and Warrior rank, which I think is a pretty good place to take that snapshot because I think there's a lot of sort of drop off in terms of casual players around that rank. I would have preferred it to be like Vanguard compared with Juggernaut, because I think that is a pretty big rift in terms of player skill between those ranks, and I think we could get some more interesting information by looking at that, but this is still very useful. So the thing that I noticed when I looked closer at these rates the other day is that if you look at the fifth most popular character on this list, which is Kazuya, and then you look from there downwards, you can actually see a very sort of linear digression all the way down to the bottom. The exception to that is Kuma and Panda, but you have to consider that they are actually the same character, so you have to add those two together and then put them in somewhere in the middle of these pick rates, and then they actually fit in very nicely to this sort of linear digression. It's almost like a diagonal line from top to bottom. But if you look at the top, especially at the top three characters, they are actually dramatically more popular than any other character. Paul, Dragunov, and Brian see so much more popularity and so much more picking than all the other characters. And I wanted to just give you my analysis of why I think that is. Now, this is going to be conjecture, it's just my sort of own opinions on the issue. What I want to do here is I want to give you, I want to create the opportunity for a little bit of a discussion. Let's say I'm not trying to attack people who are just playing their favorite characters because they like them for some, arbitrary reason, and they're just trying to have fun with the game and trying to get better. It's not about that, but I think we can still sort of do some generalizations in terms of trends and why these characters see and enjoy so much more popularity than some of the others. So when I thought about this, I think there are two things that sort of determine on the whole why characters become popular, especially at casual levels of play. And I think the first one is relative character strength, which is pretty obvious. How good is the character? And I think the other one is character complexity. How difficult is it to do well with the character? How much do I actually need to think when I'm playing? And I think you sort of have already realized where I'm going with this. If there's very little complexity and very little difficult thinking and strategy associated with the character, I think that boosts the popularity. And if they're very strong, if they do very well, despite not being complex, I think that also boosts the popularity of the character. And I think Paul, Dragunov, and Brian actually epitomize that sort of archetype. I think these characters are extremely simple to use while simultaneously being extremely easy to win with, and you can do extremely well with them, and you can win a lot, especially online, especially at slightly lower ranks, without having to worry about a lot of the more difficult aspects of Tekken. If you look at the bottom of the chart, you'll see that you have characters like Yoshimitsu, Master Raven, Lee, close to the bottom, and I think these are characters where you not only have to worry much more about a large complex move pool where you have to pick a specific move for the situation that you're in. If you end up in back turn with Raven, which you're going to do a lot of the time, you can't just stand there and just do the same move every single time. You need to sort of evaluate the situation and then do something very specific. Sometimes that is just opting out of back turn with a down back. Sometimes you want to do a low. Sometimes you want to mix that up with a mid. Sometimes you want to jab up because you want something fast. You also have to think about whether or not the move that you used to enter back turn with was a hit or a block, because the frame data in those two situations are so very different that your decision needs to be Your decision is going to be slightly more difficult, but it's also going to have to be made very fast depending on the situation. I think if you're playing Paul, Dragunov, or Brian, a lot of the time you don't really need to worry about any of these things because you can just do your favorite moves, and in most situations they're going to land you in a situation where you can just keep on going and you don't really need to worry about your spacing. And I think that's where we get, I'm going to summarize this trend. It might sound a little bit disingenuous, don't get hung up on it, but I think it's like Cancer at the top, gimmicks at the bottom, and then all the real characters somewhere in between. Let's talk a little bit about the specific characters at the top, and then I want to talk about some other statistics that I don't think you guys have seen yet that I pulled the other day that I want to show you as well. So if we start with Paul, I mean, he's always been super popular. When I started getting a little bit more serious about Tekken back in Tekken 6, a lot of people were talking about how he's a great starting point when you want to learn the game because he is extremely simple, but he has a lot of very typical Tekken things like a hop kick and a down 4-2 and a roll dash, and so that's, people described him as a little bit of a starter character back then. I think that's changed, but it's still the case that if you're using Demolition Man and you're using Death Fist, and you know, every time you're in a position where you feel like you're not winning, you can pray a little bit to Lag Jesus and you can throw out a couple of low launchers, then you can get very far with him without having to try all that hard. Every time you're in a spaced out situation and you're playing against an opponent who does not sidestep or sidewalk much because they're not comfortable with that, and they do not Korean backdash cancel to create space, you can trooper roll in any spaced out situation with Paul, and you're either going to be at no risk whatsoever if you get blocked, but you might also get a massive launch. So okay, I'm in a spaced out situation, I'm going to trooper roll. I'm losing the round because I ate a lot of damage. Okay, I'm gonna gamble on Death Fists, or I'm gonna try and launch low, or I'm gonna start grabbing and grabbing and grabbing, and then apply this favorite Oki that I have that tends to work on casual players most of the time. And there's a lot of that going on. I think Death Fist is a little bit problematic. Like I've said before, I've talked about the move. It's balanced in theory, but it's very unfair unless you know specifically how to deal with it. No news there, but yeah, Paul is extremely popular for a lot of reasons, but I think those are some of them. And then if we move on to Dragunov, exactly the same way with Dragunov. Almost any situation you're in with him, if you can do a running 2, it's not a bad idea. It's never going to be like a catastrophic decision to do a running 2 because of how good the move is. And no matter what happens after you've applied running 2, you're usually in a advantageous position, because if you get a hit, you get a knockdown, massive damage, good Oki. If you get a counter hit, you launch the opponent for half of their life bar, you usually get the wall, you're going to snowball that into taking the round. And if you get blocked, you're at plus frames and you get a free mix-up. You're supposed to sidewalk the running 2s, but that's hard to do, and at low ranks almost nobody knows how to do that. So if you can just do running 2 in most situations, you sprinkle in a couple of these down 2s, which is the go-to low. He doesn't have to worry about any other lows really, and if your opponent starts blocking those, you mix in the up 4-4 for the mid mix-up, which is again a safe option, a safe bootleg hop kick. He doesn't have to worry about getting block punished. Then those 3 moves create a very complete package, and you can steamroll people who aren't experienced playing against Dragunov. And if we move on to Brian, I've mentioned this before, and it's a controversial opinion of mine that I know a lot of people disagree with, and that's fine, but I'm going to be honest and say what I actually feel. I think Brian is probably the most simple, low execution, abusable character in the entire game. He's my least favorite character design of all time, and I know a lot of people disagree with that. They think they're very excited about Brian, especially when like Knee picks him at Evo Japan, you know, and it's like this blast from the past and everybody's very excited. But I think, yeah, if you wanna be Knee and you wanna do taunt cancels into jet upper and stuff, I know that's very difficult to do, and I know there's a way to play this character that is very dramatic and cool to look at. But if you want to go online and you want to steamroll people who don't know specifically how to deal with the unfair pressure and hitboxes of Brian, I think he's just the perfect character to abuse the online environment with. I think he epitomizes that in a lot of ways. Uh, Again, he doesn't have to worry about his spacing. He doesn't have to worry about all of these things as long as he can just keep attacking. So one example of what I'm talking about, and if you've probably noticed this because you play against Brian all the time online, but if you haven't, then think about it the next time you face him. Every time he ends up at a significant frame disadvantage and he has to stop attacking, which happens rarely, but when it does happen, a normal situation you have to sort of worry about maybe eating a mix-up, and in those cases you have to consider what character your opponent is playing. Or you want to start spacing, blocking, sidestepping, backdashing. But if you want to do none of this because you're not comfortable not being in a state of attacking, you're not comfortable not being in a state of applying pressure, what the Bryans tend to do is they almost always opt out with a down jab, and as soon as they've gone into crouch from the down jab, whether that hits or not, they don't tend to consider that. They opt out of crouch with that while standing move he has. I don't know if it's while standing 4 or while standing 3. It's that new counter hit launcher that they gave him, which is like another like safe, super strong option from full crouch. And so he just goes, and that creates a bit of pushback. If it counter hits, it gets a launch, and then he's just back to his favorite flowcharts. People are very scared of dealing with his lows and his down jab because of the fact that he can abuse his orbital, which is a move that I think has a better hitbox than it has any right to have. And that's why he gets so much incredible mileage out of good lows like, you know, hatchet kick, which I think is very, very problematic. And then he has his, he has his 2 soccer kicks. He can use those to apply very simple, super effective Oki. And there's not a lot of cognitive complexity going on with anything in that situation either. And so that's why I think these characters are at the top of the pick charts. And I want to again reiterate the fact that if you like these characters and you're just trying to have fun with your favorite video game or playing your favorite character, I can't criticize you for that. I'm not trying to attack anybody personally. I'm just trying to give you my idea of why we see these trends. And I mean, think about it. When you successfully deal a large chunk of damage in this game, you launch somebody, there are sparkles all over the screen, you do a huge combo, you win a round, there's like an explosion of positive chemicals in your brain. It feels very good, it's very addictive. And then if you all of a sudden try to like maybe play another character, if you go down the charts here and you can start playing, I don't know, arbitrarily try out maybe Master Raven, and then you don't get to do that because you have to worry about all these different things, and while you're worrying about those things your opponent is just steamrolling you. I think it's very, very likely that you're just going to gravitate back to and sort of fall back onto Paul, Dragunov, or Brian, because it's just a lot of fun to win and to do damage, and you can do that sort of in a carefree way. The question then becomes, are you actually worrying enough about actually improving your game and playing real Tekken that you're going to be able to take your Dragunov to a high level and become a serious competitive Tekken player? Or are you content just doing running 2s in the high green ranks to low yellow ranks like for years and years and not really moving on? Well, that's gonna come down to why you choose to play the game and what you enjoy, but who knows. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is some statistics that I pulled from online the other day that I think you might not have seen, and it's this right here. This is the same statistics in terms of it is the pick rates of characters, but this is specifically for arcade cabinets in Japan. In Japan, we play Tekken in the arcades a lot. It's where I learned to play Tekken 7 the first 2 years when Tekken 7 was out. I basically lived in the arcades and I played the game a lot there. And I wanted to maybe contrast the differences between these charts a little bit, because I think we might be able to learn something from that. So you can see that the top 5 characters are exactly the same: King, Brian, Kazuya, Paul, Dragunov, but the order is very, very different. I think King has been the most popular character in Japan ever since the game was released. I think Brian has overtaken him a couple of times. They have sort of gone back and forth a little bit. But that's been the case a lot. I think that might have to do with, in Japan we have much more, many more players who are, not necessarily teenagers or in their younger 20s. Serious Tekken players tend to be in their mid-30s because they've been playing Tekken for a very long time, and so they love these legacy characters like King, and pro wrestling is still a big thing in Japan, which is why I think King might see a little bit more popularity. But more interesting than that, I think, is the fact that the most popular female character in Japan seems to be Asuka, whereas if you look at these previous statistics that I brought up earlier, you have Katarina and Lily, and that's very surprising because if you look at the Japanese stats, you can see that Katarina is actually very close to the bottom. I should say, by the way, that the left here are the top 10 picks, and on the right you have the bottom 7 picks, so I haven't included the midsection. Katarina does not enjoy a lot of popularity at all in Japan. I basically never see her online whatsoever. But if you look at the global statistics, her and Lily are popular, and I think that has a lot to do with the things I talked about earlier. Lily and Katarina are known as being high risk, high reward characters. All that means is that they have a lot of really powerful big lows that you have to react to specifically in order to punish them. They have a lot of very powerful linear moves that you have to do a very specific movement based thing to deal with, and if you're not comfortable with doing that, then they're just going to crush you. And so again, it's low complexity, you can just apply your offense, and if you happen to run into an opponent who knows how to deal with your character, has the reaction time to do it, then you might lose. But most of the time you're just sort of like oscillating somewhere in the green to yellow ranks back and forth, and you're just playing your favorite game and not really worrying about all the difficult stuff. And I think that's a little bit different in Japan. And I gotta say, I have a lot of sympathy for you guys playing this game in the West, because if I look at these statistics, and I have to say that I think this represents the world that I live in a little bit better. When I play online, even on console here in Japan, this is what I see. This is what I feel I see. I see King and Brian at the very top. I see Kazuya being extremely popular. He's up there with Paul and Dragunov, so this makes sense to me. I almost never see Raven. I almost never see Katarina. So like I said, it makes sense to me. I think I probably have a little bit more of a varied and fun environment to play in than a lot of you, and I think I feel a little bit sorry for you that you have to play in an even more sort of, let's call it, cancerous environment than I do. But I just thought it was interesting to contrast these statistics a little bit. I think that Japanese players, it seems, tend to be a little bit less scared of execution difficulty and tend to worry a little bit more about, you know, if they like what the character looks like and stuff like that. I think those things come into play more when you have a large pool of legacy players. That's going to wrap up my little analysis. The last thing I want to talk about before we leave this is I want to give you another controversial opinion that I hope isn't going to lead to a lot of people disliking my video, but you've seen that none of these statistics include geese, and I just want to give you a quick comment on geese before we leave this video. I think that I can't speak for global, or I can't speak for like America, but in Japan, Geese right now is probably going to be very close to the top of these charts. He's seeing an extreme amount of popularity right now. I think he's actually up there with the top 3 or 4, just based on my personal experience. And having looked closer at that character design right now and figuring out his frame data, having played him so much online, I have to say that I really dislike this character. I think he's underdeveloped while simultaneously being overpowered. I think you can go into these very long strings. You can max mode in the middle of them, and while you do have to have some basic execution, you know, you need to be able to do quarter circles and half circles, and you need to do some of that stuff. It's not for the super basic players, but if you know the fundamentals of Tekken, again, you can steamroll people with this character pretty easily. And there are complex ways of dealing with him that you have to learn specifically to beat the character, especially now that he's very new. A lot of people just don't know that, and it has ended up allowing Geese to be abused. And it very often right now, when I see Geese almost all the time, it turns out that the character, the player, say that I play Geese on Savior rank, I play Geese on Destroyer rank, and I look at their highest rank that they have on their account, it tends to be Destroyer, which means that Geese is their highest ranked character, and then they have a very low amount of wins. So what that usually means, what I extrapolate from that, is that you have a player has been struggling in playing a lot of characters. Geese comes out, they start abusing him, and they quite quickly, without having to spend all that much time learning complex things, reach a level or a rank that they haven't had before. Because it's easier to kill people with Geese than it is with other characters, in my opinion. And I know a lot of people love Geese right now and enjoy him. I just think he sounds annoying, he looks annoying, he screams a lot, he does the same thing over and over, and I find it frustrating. We will probably make a video about that, because this just sounds like me talking shit for no reason, but I could give you like very specific examples with frame data of why I think it's a problematic design, and I think that's required if you're going to say something like this, but I'm going to save that for another video. But for now, we're going to wrap this up. I am very interested to hear what you guys think about these things, so do feel free to use the comment section. I've got a couple of new guides and stuff coming very soon, so I hope you look forward to that. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.